Hello and welcome to Breathing Underwater's Musicast. This is episode number 6. This is an episode that we're doing kind of on the fly because we're about to head out and see Thursday play one of the last shows on their last tour. So we're going to record a little bit, we're going to go to the show, and then we're going to come back and give you a post-show review. So I'm Dan.
I'm Dave.
And Chris.
We're going to start off this episode with our episode theme of bands going on indefinite hiatus and or breaking up, and then most likely getting back together and or getting back together, a la Blink-182 recently, and Far, Get Up Kids, Vision of Disorder, and then Thursday and Thrice are two big ones that have announced their eventual breakup, and probably, in my opinion, are probably going to get back together at some point. Just because the nature of this kind of trend, it seems to me right now, where bands kind of break up for non-specific reasons, or just their lives have kind of gone a way they didn't expect, or they had, as a band, they reached their goals and then they were just maybe getting too decadent, or they were losing focus or whatever, or they were doing new projects that gave them a new passion, and they decided to call it a day. But then it just seems like a lot of bands, they don't even wait. Like the Get Up Kids, for instance, what were they broken up for less than like 6 years? And then they get back together and they make a new album, and then they're in a totally different place than you'd expect. And then Far, for instance, they broke up for it was like 10 years, and they get back together and they make an album that it was good in my opinion, but not really surprising. Blink did the same thing. So I just thought we could have a quick discussion about that, guys, about what are the implications? Like, what really defines a band? You know, does a band need to be like actively touring and writing all the time to be a band, or does it matter if they break up and get back together? And you know, what is it that really makes a band? And why does this seem to be happening more and more, where bands keep kind of coming back together? Is it coming from the band where they want to make music together, you know, to express themselves, or are they doing it because they want to please the fans because they still think there's like a market for their music? You know, like, is it because their wallets are getting thin? What do you guys think? Dave, you were poking me. What's on your mind?
I had two other examples. What about artists who like some of the powerhouse grunge bands like Soundgarden and STP got back together. Then they put out an album that didn't get like any big critical acclaim, or I haven't even heard them yet. Did Soundgarden put out one? Weren't they going to?
I don't remember if they're going to put out one or not. I think they are.
STP put one out.
Oh,
I haven't listened to it yet.
Rage is another good example.
Rage.
They were done, and they said they would never write together again, and then they got back together for whatever reason, and now they're talking about they're you know, maybe doing an album. And System of a Down, I just thought of them too. They never said they broke up, but they did say like they didn't know when they would ever get back together. It was like an indefinite hiatus. And it's been just a few years since like Hypnotize came out, and they're already writing new material. So to me, again, like my overall kind of question is like, what's up with this kind of, you know, like indefinite hiatus thing, or we're broken up, and then they get back together, like, Biohazard, another good example. They've broken up a couple times, and then they keep getting back together. So I think they're a good example too, because they got back together and they wrote an album, and then immediately Evan left, right? Before they could even tour. And again, to me, it just begs the question: is like, is this necessary? If a band is done, should they stay done, or should they get, you know, is it? I don't know. I don't know. For some reason, that this kind of thing just kind of bugs me. Like, it's like, as a band, as an artist, like, I feel you know, communication is key, and it seems to me that this whole breaking up and getting back together thing has a lot to do with communication. Of like, what are your real goals? What have you reached those goals? Have you not reached them? Should, you know, why keep going? Like, what does Blink hope to accomplish at this point in their career? Chris, what are your thoughts?
Do the side projects overwhelm, or when the side projects don't do as well as they hoped, is that when they decide to get back together?
I don't know. I guess
just cash.
Yeah, see, that's what I'm wondering. Like, well, okay, let's look at Far for a second. I don't think that Jonah. I think it was actually the drummer, what's his name, that got the band back together. Or I think it was his idea originally, because he was writing songs or something, and he wanted to see it, if it would work. And Jonah's always kind of open to doing, whatever projects kind of present themselves at the time. So I don't think in Far's case, and they did like one tour, right? And
that was a wicked cool show in DC.
Yeah, shut up, rub it in, why don't you? I think they're an interesting example because I really don't think that they did it for the money. I don't think they made a lot of money off of it. I think they put out that album and it got mixed reviews, and then I'm not sure how much it sold, but I don't think it sold a huge amount. I don't think their tour, there was like small clubs, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think they made. But Blink-182, I mean, they're already selling like amphitheaters.
Blank also was much more of a huger band than Far ever was.
Yeah, but so like Plus 44 was doing just fine, I think, and so was Angels and Airwaves. So it kind of begs the question, like, do you think those guys and the egos in that band, like, do you think they really were like, we have something we really need to express, we need to put that out there, like we got to get back together, or was it like, I don't know, like, the fans are clamoring, and I don't know, like what, because I think they're, especially Tom DeLonge, like he's Angels and Airwaves is still going strong, so it begs the question of like why.
Didn't one of their band members almost die in like a plane crash though too?
Yeah, Travis Barker. I don't think that had anything to do with them getting back together though.
Really?
Because that was a few years ago.
Okay.
I wonder if you think of new bands starting out there, they're the band is their life, is their main project that they will say, some band really makes it with this group they're in there. They spearhead it, that one thing, and let's say they get large, like one of the bands you're mentioning, who's more large, like Blink or something. What happens? I'm thinking that they get to a point where they put out albums, they've toured, they've done all that work, and eventually this band faces what we call in biology entropy, which faces sort of like degeneration, and the band may break up or whatever, go on a hiatus, which can happen to most bands. A lot of these artists they go into side projects, but some of them, like Biohazard, they'll open up. Don't they have recording studios? Or
Yeah.
They're really some of these people end up behind the scenes. They produce, they do all kinds of stuff, and they make money off it. I know like some Evan or some guys Biohazard make a good money on.
I think it was Billy and Danny had a studio in Jersey. I think I have to check on that, but yeah.
Some of these artists, I'm thinking they have something like, think of Blink. They've been around so long. They're doing all this. They know so many artists, and they're like the peers. They're so established in the music business that maybe their original band that got them where they are is just ends up being another project. They're just another side project. They were the band that got them in the system, but they're just another project to play around with again. So it doesn't really matter like it used to, because it doesn't work out. I go back to whatever I was doing. Like Jonah, singer-songwriting, putting things out.
They always have a fallback. Yeah.
Yeah, the fallback. It's a career now. You're not. It's not that band that keeps having to produce big hit albums. It may be more economic, a career thing. I'm a career in the system. I've done the band thing. We get together again with our core group once in a while and mess around, put out a half-assed album, in some artists' cases, and go back to our regular music lives.
I think that's a really, really good insight, Dave. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think like Far is another one that's a really good example of what you said, because I think they were all doing their own thing. Like I know Sean Lopez was producing a lot of material, and Jonah's always been doing what Jonah does, and etc. And I think the opportunity was there, and they all kind of took it, and then they kind of did it, and then they just left it there. But like System of a Down or Rage are an interesting one to me, because, and this is kind of another side of the coin. I wonder if for some of them, like their solo projects just aren't as either lucrative or as fulfilling as maybe being in a full band. For instance, like Tom Morello's been doing the Night Watchman, and who knows, Zach De La Rocha like fell off the face of the earth, and then the other guys were doing Audio Slave, and then Audio Slave broke up. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it is kind of what you said. Like it's just another project. Like the things they were doing were losing steam, so they want to do something maybe they thought that they could keep going with, or I don't know. I wonder if also like was it like System of a Down, like Serge Tankin, I don't know how to say his name. You know, his solo project I think did pretty well, but I wonder if he was able to really explore, you know, the extent of what he wants to express with that solo project, because I think a lot of times when these artists kind of go off on their own, they don't do as well. Yeah, they don't do as well as when you know, when they're with the people that help bring out that best expression. Like another one that comes to mind in that vein is like Phil and Anselmo. He has not been able to do anything on his own away from Dimebag and Vinny, you know, and Rex. Even with Rex and like Down, I don't think Down even closely compares to Pantera, in my opinion.
I think they're listenable, but they don't have. You just have all those guys together.
Because it was like it was Vinny and Dime that like kind of brought, you know, grounded him and gave him something that could match his level of intensity. Whereas the other bands he's been in, I don't know. I think that it's too much Phil. You know, and you see that with a lot of these guys, they go off on their solo projects, and it's just too much of them and not enough of other people balancing them out. So I think there is something, even though sometimes it seems like it might be a little, you know, unnecessary for some of these bands to reconvene after a long amount of time. You're sort of like Jason said on an earlier episode, you know, he was like, why would Blink get back together? Who cares? But maybe for them, like especially like those guys, obviously have really big egos. You know, maybe they needed each other to kind of to be able to still create something quality as opposed to just going off on their own. Mm-hmm. And then Dave also mentioned Vendetta Red. I think they just got back together, and that's pretty awesome. Mm-hmm. I'm excited. Chris, do you have anything else? I'm sorry, we've been dominating.
No, just I read some of this book to the library once. I think it was Retromania, and it's just how our whole pop culture scene since about the mid-90s is just become this thing of obsession with retro, with the past. Like every pop culture thing is feeding on the past, and that's one thing I've seen as a sample of all these bands getting back together. And even with all the huge classic bands that, 50-something-year-old guys that are suddenly touring again from bands in the 80s and the 70s.
I think that's an excellent point. Retro seems to be a very marketable thing.
I saw the LA punk band X a few years back, and sonically it was an amazing show, but the whole time the band members, the drummer in the back center, you had the lead singer dead middle, the guitarist far left corner stage right, the other singer far corner stage left. And it's like they didn't really interact with each other. They kind of did worked within their own cylinder. And it was just kind of a weird experience in that way. It really felt like they're doing this just for the nostalgia factor of making a buck, because they all still have careers in music. They have, semi-successful solo CDs that they've put out. So,
did X write any new material for this tour?
Oh no, it was completely all old material.
So actually, that brings up another point about this. And for any of you that have seen Sam Dunn's Metal Evolution on VH1 that's airing right now, it's about halfway through the series. We'll talk about that in a little bit. He talked about that in the last episode that aired called Glam Metal, and he followed some of these bands around, especially Poison was a big focus, about how they are not writing new material. They've got back together and they're doing some nostalgia tours as sort of like kind of like Dave said, like an extra project. Some of them needed the money. Some of them have other avenues of revenue coming in, and this was just more of a fun thing to do, more of a project-oriented thing, something to keep them busy. But they're doing it purely for nostalgia's sake. And the people, they've said they've noticed at their shows, the majority of people that have come to these tours are people that were original fans. They're not making new fans with that. And I guess that leads me to the final question here is, do you think that because the trends in music and evolutions in music happen pretty quickly, and I wonder if is it worth it for some of these bands? Like for instance, Blink-182 is an interesting one because, and I'd be curious to know. I kind of wish I had been to their show recently in Virginia. I wanted to see if the kids were into it as much as we are, because we're it's been a while since they were together, and even in 7, 8 years that they broke up. The landscape has changed a lot since they put out their last album, and When I was teaching middle school in Hawaii, a lot of my kids liked them, but my kids here have no idea who Blink-182 is. So I don't know. It makes me question whether or not is it really worth it in the long term for a band to get back together and be an active band again, or is it better for them to just do it as a more, like Dave said, a project kind of thing where they can do it temporarily and then not have any expectations, and then just do it more for their own posterity.
Pleasure.
And then just go about their, back to their other projects that they were working on. What do you guys think about that? Is it worth it? Do you think, or do you think that by the time, like 10 years go by, are you gonna be making new fans? You know what I mean? Or is it just gonna be purely like nostalgia? Like, oh, good, Blink's back together, and I really want to go see them because I haven't got to see them so long. Or is it like, oh, I've never heard of Blink-182 before. My dad likes Blink-182 or something, or my older brother liked Blink-182 back in high school, and I'm in high school now, and like the musical landscape has changed since popular high school bands were popular, and now it's different. So it makes it's like, is it even relevant anymore, or should you just like let the newbies come and take over?
As long as it's the original members, I think you deserve a chance at seeing, can you recapture any of the old magic or popularity, or, to see, have you stood the test of time where you will have fans who are now, whatever, late 20s or middle age coming out still and supporting you because they heard you when you were teenagers. Or but then on the other side, you have bands who are, taking on the lead actor that played your dead lead singer in a movie.
Germs.
Or you have your former, I believe, drummer deciding to reconvene a bunch of people that he knows and playing your songs that haven't been played since your lead singer committed suicide years ago. Peter Hook and Joy Division, which got the other members of Joy Division and New Order really, really pissed off.
Oh, we won't even talk about Misfits then, because they're like a whole new band, and they're
Art Alexakis and whatever itineration of Everclear.
Yeah.
Oh, really? How about Gore? Aren't they? This is a long time ago when I heard this. I didn't really follow them, but aren't they supposed to like pass down their costumes to like the next generation of band to keep Gore going? I think I heard that.
Well, that's sort of like Dread Pirate Roberts.
Yeah. Dread Pirate.
Is
Roberts.
it? And you know what? Is a Dread Pirate Roberts kind of mentality? Is that what is a band bigger than itself? Is a band more of an idea? Well, we're getting too philosophical here, so let's move on.
I don't know.
I think we've covered enough ground there. So we are headed out to a Thursday show here in Washington, D.C. in a little bit. But before we do that, we are going to give our thoughts on Thursday's latest and possibly last release, unless they get back together, which I'm going to put my hat in the ring right now and say that they're going to get back together. Just because of this trend that's happening.
In interviews, Jeff Rickley did say that they still totally all get along and they'd like to do maybe yearly charity shows. Yeah. So.
Okay.
But
see, this is what I mean. Like, you're not breaking up, so don't say it. Don't say it. Just that's my big thing. Is like I don't mean to read into it so much about the whole philosophical standpoints about like what makes a band and stuff, but it just bugs me when it's like, we're gonna go on this indefinite hiatus, and then you as a fan, you're like, oh man, it's disappointing. You're like, oh, my favorite band, or they're not gonna be putting out stuff, and then they do, and then you're sort of like, don't tease me like that, don't trick me, So then it might even be a marketing thing where they like, that they say they're gonna do that, and then it builds desire for it.
Possibility.
So yeah. All right. Anyway, so we're gonna talk quickly about Thursday's latest release. I'm going to say No Devolution. I don't know how to pronounce that. Chris, you think it might be what?
It might be No Devolucion, but I'm just going by the Spanish No Return translation. So.
Oh, is it Spanish?
Devolucion.
Devolucion. Right, I'm going to be a dumb American and say No Devolution. All right, so what do you guys think about it? Chris, why don't you go first?
I loved it. I thought it was just a good synthesis of everything they've been building to in all the previous albums. I mean, even back from City by Light Divided, all of the synth and atmospheric elements started creeping in. They kept interweaving them throughout the different songs of the hardcore stuff, and I thought it was really kind of hit its great apex in this last album.
How do you feel compared to Common Existence?
Common Existence always felt like kind of almost like two records to me. The last 4 songs on it definitely veered into the more atmospheric synth, murky vibe, and the rest of the original songs on Common Existence were more in tune with the post-hardcore traditional rock sound. Whereas the last one, I just think it was a greater sync up of both elements together in one song.
Dave, thoughts?
I've listened to it about 3 times through. First thing I noticed is that the vocals are much more seem to be in the background. They previously seemed to be much more forefront. I've always liked their more spacey songs too in the past and synth and all that. This album honestly is only about 2 to 3 songs in the album that actually hit me at all. It's Thursday and I want to like the album, but it loses me through probably 3/4 of the songs. I probably just have to be in the right mood or listen to enough times for it to hit me, but for now still City by Light Divided is my all-time favorite album of theirs. I don't know, that's all I can say. They're good songs on it. It just hasn't hit me directly yet, so I'm waiting.
Yeah, I'm kind of where Dave is too, where I really want to like it, but it just hasn't quite clicked with me yet. I'm hoping in a few more spins it will, and I don't want to attribute that to necessarily the more spacey, atmospheric synth side of things, because I tend to like that too when it's done well. But right now, and like Dave said, I'm not finding the vocal melodies to be as catchy as they have been in their first several releases. War All the Time is my favorite of theirs, and the reason I like that one so much was because I found that one to be the most technical, which is usually not what I prefer in a band, but in this case, for some reason, it just really worked for me. I found it to also be their most emotionally charged album. There's some really interesting songs on there, especially like War All the Time. I thought and they built really well. And so the new one, like no song in particular that I can think of off the top of my head has really stuck out to me yet as like a really a song that's really just caught me, like either technically or emotionally. I don't hate it, so I'm just waiting. I think Common Existence was kind of like that for me too. So I think a lot of times, especially with great art, it can be confusing and frustrating and awkward at first, and then it grows on you after a while once it kind of clicks with however you connect with it, and sometimes it doesn't always happen right away. Some of the bands that I like the most, I didn't like at first, so. Okay, so I'm gonna, in addition to our upcoming anticipation section, I'm gonna combine that with a recommendation section. So it doesn't have to just be things that are upcoming, but maybe things that are happening right now. Not this is a music podcast. Doesn't have to be necessarily directly music related, but we'll try to keep it in that bend. So I'll start this one off. I have a couple things that are both upcoming and that I'd like to recommend. What I'd like to recommend to our listeners is, if you haven't watched it yet, Sam Dunn's Metal Evolution on VH1 on Saturday nights. It's got about 6 episodes left, I think. It's available on iTunes too, and probably other places that you can download TV shows legally, of course. It's sort of a spin-off or a continuation of his full feature-length documentary, Metal: A Headbanger's Journey, which I found really awesome, especially if you don't know what I'm talking about. Sam Dunn is a 30-something metalhead, so he's kind of in our generation and in our interest level, even though he was more into the British new wave of metal, Iron Maiden and stuff like that. But he's been a Metallica fan, a thrash fan, like Sepultura, bands like that. So I was stoked about that. There was somebody that was actually like kind of where we're coming from with metal that was doing a legit study of it, and he's also an anthropologist by trade, so he's looking at metal in terms of societal and human evolutionary standpoint. So he's looking at the history of metal and the influence and the roots of where it came from. And he's also looking at it as a movement and how it's changed and evolved and grown and influenced other things over its history. He looks at about a 40-year history. So far he's gone through like pre-metal, and he's looked at like everything from classical to jazz to blues, and he's got all the way up through glam metal, and he's touched on grunge a little bit. So I'm hoping that he's going to start with grunge and maybe talk thrash in the next couple episodes. And I'm really looking forward to when he gets to sort of when we all kind of got in the middle around like the new metal and hardcore eras. I'm looking forward to see what he has to say, because already he's said throughout his journey, looking into this whole thing, that he's grown an appreciation for things that he used to hate. As a younger person, when he hated glam metal because he was a thrash kid or a British new wave kid or whatever. But now he's hung out with like guys from all different genres and all different walks of the metal life, and he said that he's found a lot of things to connect with and appreciate, and he's even gotten into some of that music that he didn't necessarily like before. So I find that really interesting, and what I really appreciate about the show is that somebody's finally shining a legitimate, technical and valid and respectful light on this genre, and somebody's actually paying a real homage to metal and not just writing it off as like a youthful exuberance that that metal's something that crazy testosterone driven kids listen to, and then they grow out of it when they get their head on their shoulders. But that it's an actual legitimate movement of music, and it's worthwhile, it's valid, it's quality, and it has its place amongst all other types of music. And I just really appreciate that, and I'm really stoked that somebody's finally doing that. Even my parents had to agree that they don't like the music, but they can appreciate the things that he said about it. So Dave watched an episode with me so far, and I'm going to show you the rest. And Chris, if you haven't seen it yet, have you seen it?
I saw some of the feature-length film he did originally.
Okay.
But it only taped the first half of it or something, so I never saw the full thing. And then you just told me about the series recently.
Yeah, so
you
gotta
check that out.
You gotta check that out. I wanted to recommend, if you haven't started using it yet, Spotify is pretty sweet, because you can. For me, I'm not in front of my computer enough, and I don't have the premium version yet. I like to have my music, with me. I like to have the files. That comes out of a, tapes and CDs kind of generation. I think kids probably will connect now more with Spotify because they're used to having music streamed than just listening to singles, and not as much. They don't necessarily have their they don't own their music collection as much. So Spotify, I think, is cool for that. But what I like it for is it's a good way to preview something before you buy it, to see if you really want to buy it. So yeah, check out Spotify if you're interested. You can get the free version, and then if you want to get premium, then you can have it on your mobile devices, and then it's a lot more conducive to kind of not buying the individual albums, but just having it streaming all the time. Oh, and I had two more quick things. I wanted to recommend PJ20, Pearl Jam 20, is a new documentary by Cameron Crowe, who did Almost Famous and some other movies that I didn't like as much. And I think he has a new one out now, right? It's called
We Bought a Zoo.
We Bought a Zoo. Have you seen it?
I have not. The interesting thing is Jonsi, the lead singer of Sigur Rós, great Icelandic epic orchestral shoegaze band, which may not be to everyone's taste, but he did the entire score for it.
Oh, cool.
Which is very,
all right,
very
maybe I
surreal
will
sounding.
see it.
Well, as long as it's better than, was that Queensland?
No, Elizabethtown.
Elizabethtown, whatever.
Queensland?
I don't know, that's some...
That was horrible. Oh, God.
So I heard.
No idea what he was doing.
Anyway, but yeah, Pearl Jam 20, Pearl Jam was the first band, I think, that Dave and I, other than Weird Al, that we got into, we bought music by when we were kids. And for some reason, I never really got into the personalities of the band. I was into Pearl Jam really big for a while, and then I kind of, after after No Code, I think I just kind of stopped listening to the newer stuff for the most part. But then this documentary really kind of opened me up to them as a band and their personalities, and I wouldn't say it was the best put together documentary I've ever seen. It didn't. I thought they could have gone a little bit more further with just the pure history and information that they gave you, but there was a lot of live footage, a lot of kind of weird montages of things. But For the most part, I found it to be really, really interesting. I got a lot of history I never knew about the band, and it really kind of invigorated me to go back and listen to all of Pearl Jam's catalog in context of where they were at with each album. So I can actually listen to like Binaural and Riot Act, which I think I've listened to like twice in the whole time they've been out, with a more open and critical ear. So I would definitely recommend checking that out. And then lastly, I wanted to, for an upcoming spotlight on something, is Soulfly is working on a new album, and hopefully it'll be good. But with the track record that Max has set so far with the past several Soulfly albums and Cavalera Conspiracy, I'm not really expecting too much creativity out of it.
Not another Dark Ages.
Yeah, I think he kind of peaked there. I love Max, and I like everything he does, and I can listen to it, but I'm just kind of getting frustrated because I feel like he's just not taking anything anywhere new. And one thing I liked about Soulfly was that he did integrate. The whole point of Soulfly was to be an integration project where he had a lot of guests and a lot of different. He tried to combine every style of music he could with metal. But now I feel like he's kind of outgrown that, and he just wants to do thrash. And if you read any interviews by him, he talks so much about old Sepultura that I feel like he really is playing a nostalgic thing. And maybe it's because he's getting older and he's looking back at his past. But I feel like Max was really innovative for a while there, and he got a lot of flack for it, especially in terms of new metal. But I don't care. I think he was being really creative with what he was doing, and I don't know. Like if you hear the new Cavalera Conspiracy album, it's just like every song, same thing.
One thought I've always had on Max, he's one of those artists, like I'd say put Machine Head in this camp, that when new metal was around and like the riding E-Core Palm Mutant thing was out, there were those bands I just could feel that they kind of didn't like to do the new metal as much. They almost wanted to do the thrash still, but it wasn't the zeitgeist at the time.
Yeah, but you know what though? Even with that, I still feel like Soulfly's first album is my favorite of his. After Sepultura, like Roots, and then the first Soulfly album are like my favorite Max material. Even I agree with what you're saying. Like they're holding back a little bit from what they really wanted to do because they were kind of fitting in with the current.
There were some bands that really would rather have done thrash, I think, unconsciously, but
yeah, I agree with you, but I love those albums so much. Maybe it was that like that reserved. Great. Maybe it was them holding back, which made those albums so good because they had to find other ways to express what they wanted to express. So
yeah.
So looking forward to that, Chris.
Yep.
Do you guys have any recommendations or anything upcoming you want to mention?
Well, we're still waiting on VOD's new one.
Yeah, come on, Tim Williams, get that together. Let's go. Chris, can you think of anything?
Not offhand.
No.
Any news on Slipknot's new one?
I don't.
They're working on a new one. You know that?
They said that? No, I didn't know that.
They're working on a
there
new
you
one.
go.
Start researching it, Dan.
Sorry, I didn't know. I thought they were still reeling from the death of what's his name, the bass player.
They are, I bet, but I mentioned this a few podcasts ago, that just offhand.
Oh yeah,
maybe the first one.
I was tired. Well, I guess the last thing I can throw in here is I know it's fallen off a lot of people's radar at this point because it's been happening so long, but OneLoveForChi.com is still going. Chi is still in a coma. Chi, the bassist from Deftones, by the way. You might want to go check that out and see if there's anything you can do to help because he's still in a coma, and that sucks. All right, so if you guys don't have anything else. All right, we're going to go see Thursday at the 930 Club in Washington, D.C. It is December 27th, and when we return, we will review that show. So, aloha for now. All right, we're back. We are in the car, headed home after the Thursday show. Unfortunately, we had to leave a couple minutes early. We had to catch the metro, so we missed the encore. But we saw the rest of the show, and it was, I think we can all agree, it was pretty awesome. Dave, what'd you think?
It was awesome as always. They have a great stage presence. They played a mix of a lot of the new stuff and old stuff, and it was great.
Chris, what'd you think?
Yeah, it was great. Getting to see one of my favorite bands for a fourth time was amazing. And it was just great, like Dave said, a great mix of songs, new and old. It was just a lot of fun. Good to see them going out on a high note.
Yeah, it's nice to see a band that, even though they are calling it a day, supposedly, they seem to really be having a good time, and they seem to be getting along pretty well, so there wasn't like a lot of tension on stage or anything. They put in a good show. What did you guys think of the backdrop and the video that they played just like every once in a while? You think that was well thought out, edited stuff, or was it just kind of, I don't know. Well, what do you think that was all about?
It was like a music video. They played like these interesting old 50s videos of atom bombs and kids ducking in schools and like weird medical stuff, and it was kind of cool. It definitely followed the music.
I thought the religious commentary was interesting on, what song was that?
Sugar and Sacrament.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. Chris, what did you think about all that?
It was very in vibe with their lyrics, so I thought it worked pretty well. And I like that they didn't do it on every single song.
Yeah, well,
I've seen some bands, they have a continuing like visual show during every song. It doesn't always.
Yeah.
It kind of becomes monotonous eventually, but
definitely wasn't
individual songs.
Wasn't overkill. Yeah.
Tool did that when I saw them. They had a constant video of freaky stuff, which actually worked.
Yeah, so did Nine Inch Nails. Oh, I thought it was kind of funny when the what's the singer's name?
Jeff Wrigley.
When Jeff Wrigley was taunting the guitarist about drinking, because he was talking about the Thursday drinking song, where every time they mention New Jersey in a song you have to drink, which was right before they play War all the time, and he was taunting the guitarist that he should drink and break edge, which I was severely offended by, but that's okay. I don't know, they had a really good presence, and I think they did a lot of stuff from Full Collapse. You know, like obviously they were kind of hyping up the nostalgia factor, but good show. Thanks for the almost 14 years, guys.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we'll see you when you come back for your reunion tour, which I expect you to. I wanted to mention that one reason I respected Thursday a lot from the very beginning was that they, when I lived in Philadelphia, they always said that they would come back and play the church. And if you know anything about Philly, the church is the first Unitarian church that uses themselves as a venue for a lot of local and quasi-national acts that come through, booked by R5 Productions, totally DIY kind of thing, and they always said that they would play the church no matter how big they got, and they kept getting bigger, and they always came back to Philly and played the church, and I always really respected that. They never forgot, the people that got them to where they were, so I appreciate that. I was just gonna say too that watching them, I just had the realization that one reason I connect with them, I think we all do pretty well, is that they're definitely kind of like skinny, nerdy white boy, post-hardcore emo, and I think we can all relate to that pretty well, being skinny, nerdy white boys from the burbs. So thank God we're not from Jersey, but still, I feel like we knock on Jersey too much in this show.
That's Jersey.
Oh well, Jersey. Sorry, you deserve it.
You have some buddies I knew from Jersey who didn't like to admit they're from Jersey.
And then I knew a lot of kids in Philly that were from Jersey that loved Jersey. That was like, everything was about Jersey, and Jersey was the most amazing place to be. And on that note, I think we're going to call it a day. Next up is going to be a song selection. For this episode song pick, since we've been focusing on Thursday so much, I thought I'd play a band that is obviously influenced by Thursday and their ilk. This is a band from the Baltimore, D.C. area, a local band called Silent Film. I went to high school with a couple guys that are in this band. They do a pretty good job of writing forward-moving, kind of pulsating songs that have really good mids and lows and good solid melodies. So check it out. This is Silent Film with City Is My Sea.
and swim with me. Swim with me.
The main website for this podcast is bumusicast.wordpress.com. Please leave us feedback there in the comments section, or please email us at breathingunderwater1@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at breathingunder, but I'm only really going to post when we have a new episode available. Other than that, there's not going to be much other web presence for now. I'm just trying to keep things simple. So if you need to contact us, WordPress or email is probably the best bet.
All views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the persons expressing them and have no relation to the companies, artists, or bands discussed.
In addition, the participants of this podcast claim no rights or ownership of the musical media, songs, sound clips, etc. presented in this podcast, which are solely for promotional purposes. If there are any issues with any content presented in this podcast, please contact us and we'd be happy to take care of it.
So please do not sue us or be a hater.
Thanks for listening.